Hello and welcome everyone to live LinkedIn, weekly live LinkedIn, where we have honest conversations, wholehearted, insightful conversations on emotional intelligence. And today I'm so happy to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Precious Boyle, who is here with us to talk about self-awareness. And before we go into it, I want to welcome everyone, all the attendees, and I'd like to invite you to put something in the comment section. Tell us who you are, where you're calling from, and how you're feeling today. And and then throughout the conversation, feel free to engage and tell us, what you think about the topic. If you have any thoughts coming in, and any questions for us, feel free to ask the question. This would be your chance. So let me introduce Dr. Precious Boyle, an international speaker and coach committed to helping people transform their lives by becoming a student of their thoughts and actions. Dr. Precious has influenced hundreds of thousands of leaders, educators, and students across the US, and she is the owner of Silent Rock Educational Services. Dr. Precious is intentional about work fitting into her life and not life fitting around work. So she lives out her value of family with her husband and children in the greater Memphis, Tennessee area. Precious, welcome. It's so nice to have you. And I want to ask you the question I ask all my guests coming here. Uh, why? Being a student of you, how did you come to that, and why are you doing what you do today?
Oh, Tony, one, thank you for having me. Let's start there. I feel like this is my coming out party for Tony's Live. So thanks for having me. My why, it's very interesting. Somebody asked me this a while ago as I was working on the Me University course that's coming out in June about this same thing. And the furthest back that I can trace it is eighth grade. So
Hmm.
in eighth grade, I was the student speaker for our first Black History program at Prattville Junior High School
Mhm.
in Prattville, Alabama. And in that speech, I don't remember all the details of it, like it was eighth grade, that was a while ago. But I do remember like the sentiment was that we need you to live in alignment with who you say you are.
Mm.
And so I think that that seed has just always been there. And throughout different circumstances and situations, I've like pulled a thread here and there throughout leadership or teaching or whatever, all the things that I've done in coaching as well. And now it's just, it's come full circle. It's come to now I understand it as my purpose.
Mhm.
It's my jam. It's my calling. It's all the things that my girl Shayna Hammond talks about.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like just being who you are. And the more you know about you, the easier it is for you to actually live the life that you want to live.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
for so many of us, we were talking before we came on live, for everybody who's watching, Tony and I were chatting. We want to, when we think about emotional intelligence, we want to skip over self awareness. We want to
Mhm.
get right to empathy, to relationship management, influence, all the big ideas of emotional intelligence, not realizing that everything that you do starts with you. It's your own self awareness that allows all the other things to flourish. Otherwise, if you're skipping over the self awareness, everything else is just performative because you don't yet know you. So there's just so much power in becoming a student of you, your own thoughts and actions. I've just seen how it's transformed my life. I'm slower to speak now in a lot of situations because I realize that I need to go through my process up here before I just say the
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's a little observer out there, like looking at what's going on before it goes out, which is fantastic. Yeah, so exactly. In emotional intelligence, the first skill, the first competency that we learn, and
Yeah.
the most important one, it's a domain into itself, one of the four
Yes.
domains, is
Yes.
self-awareness, because without it you cannot do the rest of it.
There's nothing else. There's nothing
Uh,
else. And what strikes me in today's time, because we have so much social media and we have so many things that are coming up, coming into our sphere of just
mhm,
observance and into our sphere in general. We study everybody else's life. the life that they project for us on social
Mhm,
media,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
It's not their
mhm.
real life. It's that one that they want us to see. But we study all of those things. We study theory. We study anything that we think is important in history. We study the nuances and the details of those things.
Mhm.
Aren't we just as important? Doesn't
Mm.
it just make sense for us
Mhm.
to really study ourselves, our own thoughts and actions, to see why we are or are not where we want to be?
I feel though like, the tendency is more to run away from ourselves. When we see things we don't like very much, we're not sure about, it's like ignoring it and trying not to see that and focus on the outside so we don't have to spend time on ourselves. I mean, even like brilliant writers like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the Flow, he was saying that one of the reasons why we want to be totally lost in our actions, in something that we do, is because we don't want to spend time with ourselves and listen to that little voice inside.
So true. So true. And I talk about that through the lens of what's in your soil. All of this,
Mm,
if we think about ourselves as a plant, a beautiful plant, we what people see are our skills, our characteristics, our physical characteristics, how beautiful they think we are, how we make them feel when they interact with us, those experiences
mhm,
they have with us. It's a beautiful picture, but all of that sits in soil that has roots
mm,
that run deep.
mm.
And if you really are intentional about living your life the way you envisioned it for yourself when you were a young child, that beautiful life that, is glitter and glam and beauty and peace and all of those things, you've got to go into your soil and see what those roots are actually pulling out of that soil to feed you.
I love that metaphor. I mean, I can see it now. I have those beautiful roses over there in the garden,
Yeah,
and I see the leaves, the roses, the flowers, and everything is beautiful. But
yep,
underneath, there are the roots, and they're going deep into the ground to
yep,
get what they need to survive. And I feel
exactly.
like, yeah, there's that what we present to the rest of the world is the flowers, the branches, the leaves, the outside.
The
But
beauty.
inside, in order to sustain that, we need to go deeper.
You need to go deeper. Yes.
Mhm.
And one of the first things we talk about in the Me University course that's coming out soon is the rules are the rules that we live by, whether they're
Mm,
spoken or unspoken. We're
mhm,
all living by rules. It's so funny. There's this I just did a session for Toastmasters, and this came up, this article that came out in BuzzFeed last year. And it had a list. It's where like they surveyed all the readers and wanted to know what are the unspoken rules that everyone should be living by. And some of the things that made the list were never look through the bathroom stalls. Like that's common sense, but no one like wrote that down. Like no one should
mhm,
have to say that. You just
mhm,
know that it's an
mhm, mhm.
unspoken rule.
Spoken rule.
But
Mhm,
think about all the unspoken rules that we live by.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
one isolated, minute little thing. But there's
Yeah,
so many. And the more
yeah.
we can actually articulate those
Mhm,
unspoken rules, the more we can actually interrogate them first. You can't change what you won't admit is actually happening.
mhm.
So if you can actually admit that it's happening, I'm doing this because I think this, or because this is the rule that makes sense to me. This is the way I saw my parents do it. This is the way I see my best friend living out, her life. So I'm gonna do that because apparently that's the standard. That's the way.
Mhm.
But is it?
Yeah, yeah. Unspoken rules, very interesting, and I'm sure I have plenty of them that I'm not aware of because they're
Oh gosh,
unspoken,
yes,
right?
yes,
Not
so
invisible.
many.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
it's
are some
the
that are
behavior.
spoken.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah.
have the spoken ones that are clear,
Mhm,
but the unspoken ones are the ones that we don't give voice to. But it's like, especially if you're a leader, you have
mhm,
these unspoken expectations that you expect for everyone else to meet. But if you haven't
mhm.
articulated them, they don't know that that's the bar. They don't know yet. And
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
get disappointed because we're setting a bar and we're not articulating the bar, but we're upset when people don't reach the bar.
Yeah, yeah. We can see that like soon as there's the formation of a team for a project or something
Yes.
like this, there are people with whom you want to work and some people you wish you were not part of the project. And you're already doing that, in your mind, like
Yes, any relationship. Think about when I think about even now when my daughter and my husband and my son and I are all going out and we approach a door. My daughter and
Mhm,
I will stop, and my husband and my son, one of them will come and open the door.
mhm,
We never said you should. Oh, we're going to stop, so you open the door.
mhm,
We just stop and they open the door. It's an unspoken rule, but it's
mhm,
one that my
mhm.
husband started doing when we were dating. So I kind of expect him to always open the door now. So
Excellent. I love it.
yeah,
When something works, don't change it.
don't
And
change it. Don't
so
change it.
emotional, so self-awareness. We think about emotional self-awareness, but it's a lot bigger than that. It's awareness of many other things: the unspoken rules,
Yeah.
our thinking, our habits, our
Yep.
values. Uh, but how do we start with self-awareness? Like, what is your recipe for someone to
Ooh.
increase their self-awareness?
Oh, I love that question. I think it starts with, as I've already stated, like what's in your soil. And there are four things that
Mhm,
I talk about that are in
mhm,
your soil.
mhm,
One is the rules. Two are your beliefs, those internalized beliefs that have been guiding your actions and your thoughts that maybe
mhm,
you haven't interrogated.
mhm,
Three are your characteristics, those
mhm,
reinforced characteristics. Like maybe you've been a leader, and so you're
mhm,
naturally drawn to those leadership style characteristics.
mhm,
And
mhm,
then the fourth one, your values. Your
mhm,
values, all those things are in your soil. And the more you become an observer of your actions and your thoughts, the more
mhm,
you can see how those rules, those beliefs, those characteristics, and those
mhm,
values start to
mhm,
show up. They become
mhm,
more visible to you. And so the
mhm,
first step for anyone is to start observing your own thoughts and actions.
mhm,
Whatever you do throughout the day, keep a journal of what you're doing, what decisions you're making, because a lot of us lose sight of the decision point,
mhm,
especially when we're triggered. We
mhm,
lose sight of the decision point. We
mhm,
think that that person is making us do all the things. We
mhm,
lose sight of the decision point.
mhm,
But
mhm,
if we haven't interrogated what's in our soil, then we don't
mhm,
understand that this person doing this reminds us of this.
mhm,
Way back, our amygdala is searching all those places
mhm.
way
Yeah,
back when
yeah.
and searching our soil and bringing up all those same experiences and those same feelings. So it's not that you're upset with this person. You're upset with the how you didn't react in the last
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
you're reacting this way, you're overreacting this way. I think we've seen that pretty explicitly at the Oscars lately. Wink, wink.
Ooh, wow, yeah.
Just
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely a case of amygdala hijack. And
Yes.
here we're
Yes.
talking about emotional memory. It's very fast. It doesn't
Yeah.
require much thinking. It just comes up, and then it's also it has a lot of power.
Yes. Yes. The power of it. And what I try to get people to do is shift the power.
Mm,
The emotion may have the power initially, but the
hmm.
power is actually in your choice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the power is actually in your choice. Like you give
Mhm,
yourself time to process. A lot of us want to react because we feel that pressure to react in the moment. But if we
mhm,
would actually take a beat and
mhm.
actually listen to our internal thoughts, process why we're feeling the way we're feeling, process what it's connected to, all of that will get us to a better get will get that information to the frontal lobe to be able to
Yeah,
make a better decision.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if
Which
we take it to the slap, if we talk about the slap, we'll get like millions of viewers. So let's do that.
let's talk more about that.
That's what people have been doing for the last 3 months. And so it was a case of amygdala hijack. We have someone who is there and nothing much is going on. There is something happening. And then the trigger is very clear when you look at it, is when he looks at his wife. And his wife
Mm,
is like, you know, like giving a signal that she didn't appreciate the joke.
exactly.
He was laughing at the joke and then suddenly realized that, but his trigger is like, oh no, and it affected him, and I can understand that. There's probably a lot of emotion in
Yeah.
there, like
Yeah.
connected with the disease, the problems, and everything else.
Right.
And I understand that for him, it was a strong emotion coming in, saying, whoa. But
Yeah.
the thing here is that there is a lack of self-awareness
Or
and
there's a
going
lack
with
of,
the emotion and not
yeah,
being able to contemplate it as, oh wow, this is coming and I better breathe
there's a
and
flood of it.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So this is the
Recognizing,
power. The power is here, and if you don't control it, you will go on autopilot doing whatever stupid thing you're going to do. But
exactly.
if you're there, then you're able to redirect the energy and do something better with it.
Yes, the power is in the choice. And the
Hmm.
thing about it is, in that trigger, I talk about the trigger chain that I actually
Hmm.
learned the details of and kind of modified a bit from Noble Story Group. Shout out to Matt Taylor and Noble Story Group, Keith Brooks over there, and Ann Lackovitz. One of the things, what was I about to say? The trigger chain, the
Hmm.
idea of the trigger chain. So
Hmm.
we think that when we're triggered, we have that emotional reaction, we attach this value to whatever it is that's happening. We go through, we have a behavior that we decide on, we
Hmm.
make a decision, the choice
Hmm.
point is there, and we think that's the end of it.
Hmm.
No, the
Hmm.
impact of that behavior lives on.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not the end of it. When
It
you're
is
triggered
great.
and you do the thing, you doing the thing doesn't, that's not where the chain stops.
Hmm. Hmm.
It has impact. And I think we can see that in Will Smith's reputation right now, in whether people are willing to work with him, in
Exactly.
how it's impacting his family. Like
Yeah.
there's so many implications, and we're using Will. But if you think about, everyone out there who's watching and listening right now, think about your own life and the implications of your own
Hmm.
behavior when
Hmm.
you've made that rash decision and didn't think it through. You're living with the impact of those decisions.
Yeah, and we all have those moments on a smaller
Absolutely.
scale. Maybe something we do, like we were driving in the car. Maybe
Yes.
something like slamming a door
Yeah.
or refusing to talk to someone or being short. I mean, on the smaller
Yeah.
scale, we have a lot of those moments every day.
Same moments. We
Mm-hmm.
just actually saw his play out. But we have the same moments that happen in our
Mm-hmm.
lives on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis, whether it's with a colleague, what the choices that we're making when it comes to our colleagues on a daily basis, who we're going to talk to, who we're not, the
Mm-hmm.
implications of that on the culture of the building, the culture of the school, the culture
Mm-hmm.
of the workplace, the students who see that and take that on, that you may never know the full implication, but they see how the adults in the building are interacting
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they start to adapt, they start to shift their behavior to match that behavior. It's contagious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the opposite of being self-aware is being self-opaque, like not being able to see things, and I think there are segments of workers that I'm thinking about who are more self-opaque than others. Like if you are in
Mhm.
sales, you need to have more awareness because you need to
Right.
have empathy, and that leads to that. People who work on their own, looking at a screen all day long and not socializing a lot, may tend to be more self-opaque and not realizing what's going on.
Mhm.
Some of the things that I hear, for example, is like, today there was a post on LinkedIn, I think, from someone I know who said, you need to talk to the people you disagree with.
Yes.
And that's very important. And then I hear also from the same people I'm talking about that they don't need to work with their emotions. They already control their emotions and just a lack of self-awareness, like they don't realize that the reason why they're not talking to someone with whom they disagree is because they are afraid, is because they don't want to be embarrassed, is because
Yes.
they don't like that person. As soon as you have like, don't like, fear, there is an emotion in there that's keeping you from doing the things you want to do. Or the case of the promotion, you need to ask your boss, for a promotion or a
Mhm.
raise or whatever, and you're not doing it because you're already rehearsing in your head like what the conversation is going to be about. It's not going
Yep.
to go well. That's also based on your emotions. You're
Yes.
afraid to go there,
Yeah.
and self-awareness gives you that. It gives you the awareness of what's really going on, and
Yes.
once you have that, it's possible to
To
do
overcome it. Yeah.
something with Yeah.
And so that's why I say, like, I'm glad you pointed out like those different conversations,
Hmm.
because the first conversation is with you.
Hmm.
Before you go talk to your manager, before you go talk to all the people that you disagree
Hmm.
with, the first conversation is with you, doing just what
Hmm.
I already described, like going into your soil. Why is
Hmm.
this troubling me? Why do
Hmm.
I disagree? What is my real why?
Hmm.
So that you can get to the fear that's
Hmm.
underneath it, because 9 times out of 10, it's generally some sort of fear. It's connected to fear in some kind of way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so once you can uncover that for yourself, then you can have a better conversation. But
Hmm.
going into a conversation with someone else when you haven't had a conversation with yourself first is really
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We hear the same thing from people like Brené Brown, for example, in the
Yep.
Atlas of the Heart, which is currently on HBO, which is pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
She said, like, if you want to connect with other people, you have to connect with yourself first. You have to have a deep connection with yourself.
You
And
first. Yeah.
the one thing that's interesting about that too is that for me it was hard at the beginning with self-awareness,
Hmm.
to develop my self-awareness because I felt bad about what I was seeing. Like I was,
Yep.
it's like you see yourself as one thing, and then when you start self-awareness, you realize, maybe not. I'm not as good as I thought I was,
Yeah.
and I'm not as as honest as I thought I was. I'm not
Hmm.
as everything. It's like the picture we project of ourselves out there and the reality are a little bit different. And self
Yeah.
awareness reduces that gap. You become more aware of what you project and who you are,
Yes.
and that can be painful at times. So there is a real need to have a strong connection with oneself, to be really forgiving, to be able to
Yes.
see more. And I think that's to do with your metaphor of the soil. If I want my roots to go further into the soil, I have to have a strong sense of myself, and
You
I have to
do.
be able to forgive myself.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll refer to my girl Shana Hammond one more time, because one
Mhm.
of the questions she asked in her Indigo cohort, Indigo Women's cohort, was how do you make peace with all the ways you've betrayed yourself?
Mm. Mhm.
Because for a lot of us, even when we do that knee-jerk reaction to whatever the thing is, that's not really who we want to be. And at our core, that's not really who we are. We just didn't give ourselves enough time to process what was happening to make an informed decision that was actually aligned to who we
Mhm.
actually are.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's what causes us to have to go back and apologize and do all the making up and the relationship building. But if we start with self first and go
Mhm.
into that soil and start peeling back the layers of what's there, why is it there? What is it connected to for me? Then it's not
Mhm.
what it's connected to for everybody else. It's what is it connected to for me? What is my truth about this particular situation or this particular trigger? Then what do I do with that? It
Mhm.
starts with self. How do I forgive myself for that?
Yeah, yeah. And connected to that, I mean, I'm going back to like things like Daniel Kahneman's System One and System Two, thinking
Hmm.
fast and slow, where he explains that we have a tendency to think a little bit too fast.
Yes.
But we could not function in the world if we were not doing that. And that's connected to our habits, to our beliefs, and so on. So the
Yes.
reality is that people who are doing really well outside in the world out there are people who were lucky to gather good habits. They
Yes.
had, the role models, the education, whatever.
Hmm.
They gathered the good habits and they function really well. But for some who are less lucky, did not gather the good habits, it may be a little bit more difficult. And the
Yeah.
work we're talking about is really going inside, figuring out those habits, those self beliefs, and so on, and
Yeah.
modifying them. It's working
Yeah.
on habits.
It's slowing down enough to see the habits.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about habits, we do them without thinking.
Hmm.
We don't put a lot of thought into
Yeah.
what we do when it's a
Hmm.
habit.
Hmm.
Slowing down enough to see the habit is where the work is. That's where
Hmm.
self-awareness lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slowing down enough to see the habits. James Clear says every decision you make or every action you take is a vote toward the person you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
That's big. If you think about the number of interactions you have in a day's time,
Yeah.
every single decision you make, every act is a
Yeah.
vote for the person you want to be. If you're moving through life at the speed of
Hmm.
light,
Hmm.
you don't have time to
Hmm.
actually think through all of those tiny moments unless you have a really strong sense of self. Then you
Mhm.
can go faster. But in order to go faster, you got to slow down first.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain that to someone last week. We were talking about the same topic, and I said, like, the best way I can explain this is like, if you learn a foreign language, and you talk in that foreign language, at the beginning you're not thinking in that foreign language, you think in your language. So
Yeah.
you have to translate your thinking in your language into the foreign language. So that means really slowing down, and going back to what you're observing before you put it out. And with the
Yeah.
habits, the same thing. It's kind of like you have to slow down and listen to what's going on inside, review what's going on inside before you let it out.
Yes. That is, oh, Tony, that's brilliant. Yes. Come on, translation.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
That's what it is.
Translate.
It's
Yeah.
translating. And
Uh-huh.
even when, like, one of the things we talk about values a lot, even when you have, for example, I use the leadership value often because that's one that I hold dear. I approach
Mhm,
every situation like a leader. I'm
mhm,
analyzing it for the problem. I'm peeling back the layers. I'm trying to see how to get beyond this. Like I approach things as a leader because I hold
mhm,
that value. And that's been so much of my experience. I use this example of you've got to know your values and know more than just one.
mhm,
So I have a
mhm,
leadership value, but I also have a value of family that I try to
mm,
lean
mhm,
into really
mhm,
hard.
mhm,
So here's the example. My family was on a trip. My son plays basketball, but this is actually we were going to my daughter's volleyball tournament in Atlanta. We had a flat tire. My husband decided that we could make it to the next exit.
mhm,
Now, the leader in me wanted to get out, look at the tire, determine for myself whether we could make it, ask him about his process for thinking through whether we
mhm,
could make it or not. What did all, if we add all those things up, will we really make it? Like, what's the probability? Like, I wanted to do all of that.
mm,
But that was not the moment to lean into my
mhm,
leadership
mhm,
value.
mhm,
It's high stress. We're all trying to figure it out. We're on the road. So your value sometimes is a double-edged sword. So if I
mm,
didn't know another value that I could lean on for myself in my core, that leadership value would have taken me out. Our relationship would be in serious jeopardy because I'm trying to run the show and not leaning into some of the unspoken rules
mhm,
of letting a man be a man in those types of
mhm,
situations where it's dangerous and things could happen.
mhm,
But my family value is what I had to lean on.
mm, mhm,
So it's
mhm,
important, and that's why I say you got to know what's in your roots because what
mhm,
we want is for people to be good decision makers when it comes to emotional situations.
mhm,
We
mhm.
want them to be good decision makers because all of that's in your soil, but what you choose to pull on in those moments is where it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. What I really like also about your metaphor about the soil, it's like it represents something that's growing slowly.
Yes.
And it's not like, we can learn about emotional intelligence, read the books and everything else, and tomorrow we'll be a different person. It's really deep work and changing habits and
Yeah.
self-limiting beliefs, and it takes time. And I was thinking about your values, you were talking about that. Um, our values are very important to help us with making decisions, making the right decisions.
Mhm.
But when it comes to projecting our values on other people, then we go into the realm of self-righteousness. Like
Yes.
I know, and it's got to be the way. And it's not that. The values are not meant to take us there. The values are meant
Yeah.
to help us grow as a person. Uh,
Yes.
with a growth mindset and making the right decisions, but not imposing on other people. And
Yeah.
and I think your example is like you became aware that if I go there, I'm imposing on the family. So I
Yeah.
have to find another way to be right now. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, being mindful enough to
yeah,
slow down,
yeah.
process what's happening, and then think about the decision and the impact of the decision.
Hmm.
Because it
Hmm.
doesn't stop at the decision. The
Hmm.
impact of that decision, like we were on a 6-hour road trip. Like
Hmm.
that decision could have been really destructive
After
in the
6 hours, yeah, it can be. I believe you.
beginning. So we just have to be mindful and to the point of slowing down, just slow
Mhm.
down long enough to
Mm-hmm.
learn enough about yourself so that you can be an informed decision maker, considering
Mm-hmm.
what's in your soil, head, and heart coming together to make good decisions.
I love that. And I see we have a question from Roderick. Do you think it is important to remove the emotions in decision making? Emotions can change, and if you govern yourself by those emotions, the decision making can become chaotic or roller coaster like in nature. Would you like to answer that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I think that it depends on the situation, right? I think that when you're dealing with your emotions, I'm assuming that he's talking through the lens of a leader and making leadership type decisions. If it's Roderick Payne, Dr. Payne, I think that may be who it is. But I think that in you for yourself, you have to know what the emotion is that's attached. That's not necessarily for the other person to know. That's for you to understand what emotion you've attached to this decision. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily need to sway the decision. You're going to make a decision based on all the facts and all the information. But if it's one that's subjective, then it's worth you interrogating what is the emotion that you're bringing to the decision and wrestling with that. That's the first conversation that I was talking about before. Have the
Mm-hmm.
conversation with you first,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you get into the space where this person, maybe you're interacting with someone and the decision impacts them, and you're trying to make, trying to relay the decision or whatever the case may be, if your emotions are not intact in that moment, then yes, it becomes quite destructive. It could go really wrong really fast. But you've got to
Mm-hmm.
be able to manage those emotions before you get to that space.
Mm-hmm. Another angle on that is that according to science, that people like Antonio Damasio, who studied people, emotions in
Yeah.
people, and so on, they say that someone who is not able of having any emotions cannot make any decisions.
Yeah.
So decisions are always, part of it is always like emotions, and I
Yeah.
like what you say is like putting the right emotion into it.
Yep.
So to me, it's kind of like energy. You receive energy.
Yeah.
At the end, it's all a chemical factory in there. We receive like different chemicals, and that gives
Hmm.
us some kind of energy, and then it has to channel itself somewhere, and it channels through like what we've created, the neural pathways we've created,
Exactly.
and that can be something that's detrimental to us, to our reputation, to others, or it
Hmm.
can be something that's really useful. But at the end, it's energy that can be used. So
Yeah.
getting to that pause, being able to say, I am in that place where it can go one way or it can go another, and being able to redirect it, I think
Yeah.
is key to what we're talking about here. And
That's key.
self-awareness is key. Is like being able to see it before it
Yeah.
goes out.
Yeah, because I think about even in that question, if the decision that you're making is maybe to let somebody go or make a decision as a leader that will really impact somebody's livelihood, if you're not having that conversation with yourself first and wrestling with those emotions first, when you get in front of that person, you're going to feel their energy and you could say or do something that's really not aligned to the decision that needs to be made depending on the
Mhm.
conversation. But even in those decisions, in those conversations, you can't have empathy if you haven't dealt with self. And
Mm.
so if the decision needs or requires empathy, if that conversation needs empathy, you can't have it if you haven't dealt with self. It becomes performative and people read through performances.
Mhm. Mhm. Precious, we're about time, and I see like some people are saying goodbye already. But if you're still here and you have any questions, I mean, this is your chance before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Uh, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to. Uh, is there anything else like you want to share before we end, like something that really made a difference for you in terms of understanding emotional intelligence, self-awareness, being the common denominator?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that, Tony. Yes, I think that the turning point for me was having a coach.
Mm,
Having a coach. When we try to do this level of work independent of someone else, we're going to see what we see. We're going to see a lot of what we've always seen. It's hard for
mhm,
us to be an observer of ourselves and not bring all the things that we've already seen of ourselves. And so it's helpful to have someone else to bounce those ideas off of. Tony was one of my coaches at Goldman EI when we were there together, and helped me to unpack a lot of things that I was carrying that I didn't realize completely that I was carrying. And so having someone else to talk through things with helps tremendously. Tony's a coach, I'm a coach. There are several coaches that you can reach out to. I'm sure my information is somewhere in the information that's there, or I'll drop it into a link later on. But making sure that you have a coach or have some guided way to interrogate what's in your soil. The Me University online course is coming out in June. It kind of is a guide for that. So I want to plug that. Go to silentrocked.com. And you can see all that's coming there, or put your information in so that we can contact you as soon as that course is released. But we are here and available, because I just think that a lot of people think about emotional intelligence as like this magic that happens behind the curtain, this la la land, and it's all in the brain, and it's so foreign and you can't really understand it. Emotional intelligence is every day, all day, every single thing you do. It's wrapped up into every single action, thought, word. So we can't hold it until a big thing happens, and then we need to have empathy, or we need to do our DEI work. So let's do emotional intelligence. No, you actually need it to live.
Precious, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Tony. It's
And
been
thank
a
you.
blast.
Thank you everyone for attending, and we'll add those links in the comment section on LinkedIn, and so you can come back and take a look at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.